Pakistan cricket at its best. 1 minute down, next minute up.
Thanks very much, everybody, for joining me once again. Saj Sadiq here for PakPassion, bringing you another exclusive interview. My guest today is a regular contributor and a very popular contributor on PakPassion. He's the fountain of knowledge, when it comes to the Caribbean cricketing, what's happening in the world of Caribbean cricket and the West Indies team. He's a radio and television commentator. He's a journalist for a number of years. And as I say, for me, he's the voice of West Indies cricket, the one and only Fazeer Mohammed. Fazeer, thanks very much for joining me.
Pleasure to be on the program once again.
Fazeer, let's talk about the first Test match. I think there were no surprises. Pakistan made it clear in terms of the tactics they were going to use. I suppose from a West Indian perspective, the West Indian batters just didn't cope with that onslaught.
We didn't expect them to be able to, really, because West Indies batters generally struggle against quality spin bowling, even in ideal batting conditions. We've seen it happen many times right here in the Caribbean on flat, unresponsive tracks. The opposition would get 400, 600, and the West Indies would be bowled out twice. We saw that with India, and indeed it was done in Dominica a couple of years ago. Ravi Ashwin was the destroyer then. So it's nothing unusual, and therefore to see them struggle as they did and on a surface that clearly was offering tremendous assistance to the slow bowlers, it wasn't surprising at all.
Fazeer, many people have asked me, and it's a question that I've not really been able to answer. Is this the best that West Indies at the moment can provide in Test cricket, or are there some players who are injured or missing?
It's the best that the West Indies can provide. And we often hear this discussion, Saj, Nicholas Pooran would be a great Test batter. Shai Hope would be a great Test batter. If Jason Holder was available regularly, the West Indies would be a much stronger Test match team. Well, the evidence suggests otherwise, Saj, because Shai Hope played more than 20, 30 Test matches, average in the low 20s. Yeah, but for that famous Test match at Headingley where he got twin hundreds in 2017, there was very little else. And he struggled against genuine quick bowling in Test match conditions. Nicholas Pooran has never had the opportunity because he's never made himself available to play Test match cricket. And he's in demand in the franchise format. All power to him, that's fine. But I think it's a huge leap to automatically assume that someone who does well in the T20 or even white ball formats generally is going to succeed at Test match level, because it's very different. I'm not saying that it's impossible to do the transition, because we see many top players right across the board, right across the world being able to do it. But in the West Indies case, because of our situation where essentially our tiny nations can never match the money that is being offered in those franchises, it's always difficult to match that, and therefore you can't really be upset with players who prioritize their financial well-being, and that's really what the situation is.
I mean, in a way, it's sad and frustrating, you could say, when you turn on the TV and put any T20 league on, and you'll have a whole assortment of West Indian cricketers doing brilliantly in those leagues, yet the West Indies Test team is a shadow of what it once was.
It is, and it continues to be one of the great ironies, I suppose, when we talk about the situation, when you talk about your Kieron Pollard, your Dwayne Bravo, Andre Russell, Sunil Narayan, and so many others. And at times, they would have made themselves available. And there's also that issue of the management of these situations by Cricket West Indies. And it really hasn't been the best. There was a major confrontation in around 2014, 2016, when the then president of Cricket West Indies was Dave Cameron. And rather than have a mature attitude and say, look, let's work this thing out in the best interest of you, the player, but also West Indies cricket, it often is a top-down sort of attitude. You know, that old colonial mentality that I will dictate and you will follow what I say, which is more or less 19th century. The world has changed. And therefore, the players are the one wielding that power because they're in demand and because of sometimes the intransigence of the administration. You have the players basically alienated from representing the West Indies.
I remember in the late 80s and early 90s, Fazeer, and we spoke about this last time, Pakistan and West Indies fought some great test series. They were probably the two best test teams around that era, with some fabulous and wonderful cricketers. And with both countries have come a long way, haven't they, really, from those heady days to being the bottom two ranked teams in the World Test Championship.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the administration of the game in our respective countries. And I mean, far be it from me to comment on what goes on in Pakistan, but just looking on from a distance, it just seems so highly politicized in the sense that governments change, it means automatically the cricket board changes, which is not really how it should be. For us here in the Caribbean, it's a different situation where it's politicized along territorial lines. And I say territorial because we're not just islands. We've, of course, got Guyana, which is on the South American mainland. So you've got a situation where, and this has been identified over and over again by a number of successive studies, which have suggested that the Cricket West Indies, its current structure, is not serving the best interest of West Indies cricket. That you've got directors and representatives on the board who are seeking their territorial priorities first, rather than the bigger issues of West Indies cricket. And it tends to get very parochial, very insular, and indeed, at the end of the day, it doesn't really serve the best interest of West Indies cricket.
I suppose a million-dollar question that many cricket lovers around the world will be asking is, barring the occasional good series, the occasional good win by West Indies in Test cricket, most of the time they're struggling. What needs to change for West Indies to be the power that it once was in the 5-day format?
I think basically the governance format has to change, and because, as I said again, it's almost a house divided onto itself. Where, just to give you one example, there was supposed to have been a meeting last month to deal with those same governance issues and changing the structure. If you recall, the 2010-2011 Ashes series, when Australia were humiliated at home by England, who won 3 tests by an innings, immediately after that, there was a post-mortem and the governance structure was changed to really provide a more adept and more agile and more effective Australian cricket administration. And we've seen the success since. For the West Indies, you have these studies that have been done, one including a former Jamaica Prime Minister, P.J. Patterson, one including a number of other luminaries in the game, and they've all come back with the same recommendation: change the structure of West Indies cricket. Well, last December, there was supposed to have been a meeting to deal with precisely that issue, but 2 territories, Guyana and Barbados, refused to attend. So again, that brings home the house divided onto itself situation. And some will say, well, okay, the administration is one thing, you've got talented players, just pick your best players. It's never as easy as that, Saj, because if you've got players who aren't playing any first-class cricket, who aren't playing any red ball cricket, and just because they're excelling in the T20 format, you throw them into a test team, it's hardly likely that they'll be able to succeed, and it might create even greater chaos. But so therefore, you need to have an administration that is basically on the same page. And that is not what it is at the moment. So if you've got an administration where they are basically arguing among themselves, you really struggle to work out how is the situation ever going to be resolved.
It seems to me, though, if somebody comes into the test team and does well, so, before you can say anything, they're playing T20 cricket and they're taken away from the test format, and then they prioritise the white ball format ahead of test cricket. Fazeer, is that a fair comment?
Is, and I think that's where the discussion needs to be had. And I remember Stuart Lowe, the former Australian player who was coach of the West Indies for a time, just around the period of the 2019 Cricket World Cup, his tenure had come to an end. And he was saying to have precisely that discussion with the players to say, look, let's agree to 3 windows: IPL, CPL, and another franchise that we're not going to challenge it in any way. But everything else, we'd like you to make yourself available to play for the West Indies first. And if you're not required or it's not necessary, then you can go off to another franchise. But Cricket West Indies never agreed to that because, again, it's that attitude that I'm not going to be dictated to by the players, and I'm not realizing that the environment has changed. And that's why it's so frustrating for us as media people, I'm sure for the fans generally, because there's been a sense of hopelessness, Saj, for quite some time, that people feel that things are never going to change. In fact, it's probably going to get worse before it ever gets better, if it even ever gets better at all. And now we have this prospect of maybe being pushed into a second tier, which could happen from 2027. And many are fearful that if it's not properly structured, if there isn't sufficient funding, it could be the death knell for the West Indies as a test-playing nation.
Despite the doom and gloom, though, Fazeer, there were some positive signs in that first Test match, some good performances from individuals.
Absolutely. And I think from the very start of the Test match, I think Jaden Seals performed brilliantly. When we talk about a situation where, yes, it's tailor-made for spin, but quality fast bowling will still prevail. In fact, quality bowling of any sort will usually prevail, whatever the conditions. And I thought he was outstanding in that period. He bowled well in the second innings without any luck. So that in itself tells you that, look, if you've got Jaden Seals, sadly Kemar Roach wasn't well, so couldn't play. And if Shamar Joseph was there, if Alzari Joseph was there, the West Indies, even on a surface that was assisting spinners, could have been a lot more competitive. And then, of course, you've got Jomel Warrican, the left-arm spinner, taking 7 wickets in the second inning. He capitalized on the situation. And let's not forget Alec Athanaze with that half-century in the second innings. He's been identified as possibly a Test match player of quality for the long haul. But what I think impedes him is that he's in an environment where no one averages over 30. So it's almost as if you relax mentally when you get to 40, 50, because you know you've done enough to guarantee your place for the next Test match. And that's what happened. He loss of concentration. He was plumb LBW, even as he was going well. So these are the challenges. You see the potential, you see the possibilities, but they're not delivering, they're not performing to the level that you would hope for.
In the next Test match, Fazeer, and that's the final point that I was going to discuss. Obviously, it's a tough ask for West Indies to bounce back after this loss at Multan. How do you see the second Test match going?
I see it going pretty much as the first, to be quite straightforward with you, because there really aren't too many changes that the West Indies could make to the batting lineup. There's much obvious that could be done differently. One other positive I forgot to mention was Tevin Imlach, the wicketkeeper batter. He didn't get many runs, but he was superb behind the stumps, given the fact that as a former West Indies under-19 player and captain, he didn't actually keep for Guyana, his home franchise, in the first-class season of 2024. But clearly he's very competent, very adept. And what it does is that it creates pressure on Joshua De Silva, who's been in the incumbent for about 4 years. You've also got Amir Jangu, who might get a game in the second Test match. But again, it's going to be a struggle. So Saj, as optimistic as I would like to be, I see it really as 2-0 for Pakistan.
Well, let's hope it is a competitive and interesting Test match, Fazeer, and let's hope we see some good quality cricket between two sides who, I have to admit, aren't the highest when it comes to quality at the moment.
Absolutely, indeed. You really wish that the West Indies and, of course, Pakistan as well could find that old magic, but it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of perseverance, and a lot of stick-to-itiveness, not just from the players, but from the administrators, to give that talent a chance to really flower. And we'll probably have to wait a long, long time.
As always, Fazeer, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you soon, possibly at the end of the series. Thank you very much.
Take care. My pleasure.
Thank you.